We're now going to look at how to write an ordinary number in standard form. So 235.6 is just known as an ordinary number. When we write an ordinary number in standard form, this is the general form that it takes. So what you have here in this first box is a number between 1 and 10. You're then multiplying it by 10, and 10 will have a particular power. So we want to work out what numbers go in these two boxes. So first thing you do is you go to your ordinary number and you have to insert a decimal point to make it a number between 1 and 10. So the only place here we can put a decimal point such that it becomes a number between 1 and 10 is if we put it between the 2 and the 3. So we call that our inserted decimal point. So the number will now read 2.356, and that's the number that we put inside the first box, 2.356. Okay. Now to get the power of 10, the first thing you need to do is work out how many places you need to move the inserted decimal point to get back to the original one. That was the original one there. So there's our original decimal point. So to get from the inserted to the back to the original, we're going to have to move 2 places. So we have to move 2 places to the right. So that means the power of 10 is plus 2, or just 2. Plus meaning we'll have to move the inserted decimal point to the right, and 2 meaning the number of places that we have to move the inserted decimal point. So 235.6 in standard form is 2.356 times 10 to the power of positive 2. Okay, let's look at part B. Part B, we've 8,000. We want to write it in standard form. So the first thing we do is insert a decimal point to make it a number between 1 and 10. So the only place we can insert it is between the 8 and the 0. So the number between 1 and 10, we're not going to write 8.000, we're only going to write 8. And the reason for that is, when we insert the decimal point, go to the last digit after the decimal point. If it's a 0, ignore it. Then go to the digit immediately before that. If it's a 0, ignore it. Keep ignoring zeros until you get to the first non-zero digit. Okay, so ignore, 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 and then we get to a non-zero digit. So we can't ignore it. So we're just putting down 8. Okay, so the number between 1 and 10 is 8. We then have to get from the inserted decimal point back to the original one. So the original one would have been after the last 0 here. So to get from the inserted to the original, we would have to move 1, 2, 3 places to the right. So that tells us that the power of 10 is positive 3. Remember, the power of 10 is the number of places you have to move to get from inserted to original, and the direction you move. The direction you move gives you the sign. So we're having to move to the right, so the power of 10 is positive, and we're moving 3 places, so the value of the power of 10 is just 3. Okay, let's look at part C. So again, we have an ordinary number, 0.0000645, and we want to write it in standard form. So the first thing you've got to do is insert a decimal point to make it a number between 1 and 10. And the only place we can insert it has to be between the 6 and the 4. So there's the inserted decimal point. So the number between 1 and 10 is just 6.45. You don't need to include all of these zeros that come before the 6, because once you put the decimal point between 6 and the 4, 6 is in the units column. This would be the tens. This would be hundreds, thousands, they're all zeros, so we can ignore those. So the number between 1 and 10 is just 6.45. Now, in order to get the power of 10, we need to work out how many places and what direction we need to move the inserted decimal point to get back to the original one. So the original one is over there. So we're going to have to move the inserted decimal point, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to have to move the inserted decimal point 6 places. So the value of the power of 10 is 6. But this time we have to move to the left. So we have to make the sign of the power of 10 negative. Okay, part D, 60,500. We want to write it in standard form. So the first thing we must do is insert a decimal point to make it a number between 1 and 10. So the only place we can do that is here, immediately after the 6. So that's our inserted decimal point. So the number between 1 and 10 is going to be 6.05. Now, you ignore the last two zeros, because remember, the moment you put the inserted decimal point in, go to the very last digit. If it's a 0, ignore it. Go to the digit before it. If it's a 0, ignore it. Keep ignoring zeros as you work from right to left until you get to the first non-zero digit, and then you can't ignore anything before that. So that's why it's 6.05. Again, to get the power of 10, we're going to move from the inserted decimal point to the original. So the original decimal point would have been here, after this last 0. So to get from the inserted decimal point to the original one, we're going to have to move 1 place, 2 places, 3 places, 4 places. So we're going to have to move 4 places, and we have to move to the right. So the value of the power of 10 is 4. That's the number of places we'll have to move. And the sign of the power again is positive, because that's the direction we have to move to get from the inserted decimal point back to the original one. Okay. Part E. Now, part E is a bit harder and is a bit nasty. Just by looking at it, you would already think the number here is in standard form. But it's not in standard form, because the number you have here is not a number between 1 and 10. Because what the person has done is they've inserted the decimal point after the 7. That's where the inserted decimal point currently is. And what they're saying is, to move from the inserted decimal point to the original one, you have to move 9 places to the left. Okay, so that's what that means. They're saying, oh, okay, there's the inserted decimal point, comes after the 7, so we have to move the inserted decimal point 9 places to the left. But it's not in standard form. The inserted decimal point should actually be between the 1 and the 6. So when we're correcting it and putting it in standard form, it should actually be 1.67. Now, here's the nasty bit. Where this person had the inserted decimal point, they then have to move it 9 places left. So they have to go this direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But we have put the inserted decimal point in the right place, so we've already moved it 2 places to the left. So that means we only need to move the inserted decimal point that we've put in 7 places to the left. So the power of 10 is going to be -7. Okay, that's quite hard. So the inserted decimal point again that they put in was in the wrong place, and because it was in the wrong place, they had to move that 9 places to the left. But we then put the inserted decimal point between the 1 and the 6, so we have already moved it 2 places to the left from where it originally was, or where it was here. So then we need to move it a further 7 places to the left to get it into the same position. So just be careful. Okay, so part F. Again, it looks like it's in standard form, but it's not, because the number between 1 and 10, well, it's not a number between 1 and 10, so we have to make it a number between 1 and 10. So this is where they've put the inserted decimal point. The inserted decimal point should be between the 1 and the 0. So we're going to correct that and write 1.05. Now, where they've put the inserted decimal point, they're telling us that we have to then move it 5 places to the right. So we would have to move it 5 places to the right to get it back to the original one. But we've shifted the inserted decimal point 1 place to the right. So that means you only need to move it a further 4 places to the right to get it back to the original decimal point. So that means the power of 10 here would be just positive 4. Okay. So those last two examples are just a little bit trickier because it looks like they're in standard form, but they're not. The inserted decimal point is in the wrong place. You need to put it in the right place, but by putting it in the right place, that will affect the power of 10. That will affect the number of places that you're going to have to move it. Okay.